Thank you so much, Karen, and welcome everyone. I tried to type a welcome into the chat box and started wildly advancing the slide. So I will just greet you all very warmly now and tell you that we're so happy to be sharing this time with you right now. My name is Jonna Dara Ernst, and I'm a faculty member at Heartland Community College. And our segment today is divided into three main sections. I'm just going to share a brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn things over to John Ernst, who is going to share some applied practices for adults. And one of the things that we're really going to stress today is the incredible importance of when we're working on mindful strategies with young children, how important it is to really work on mindful strategies and practices ourselves, that works hand in hand. So that's very much how our workshop is organized today. In the third part, I'm going to share a lot of practical strategies for implementation. One of the great pleasures of my professional life is partnering with our Child Development Lab at Heartland Community College, where we've been able to try and refine a great deal of these practices, as well as just benefiting from all the research and applied practices that are happening all around the country. One of the things that I'd like to stress is that we would love to hear what's working for you, what you have found to be effective within the classroom environment. And so we're hoping, especially in that last segment, to have a very active chat in terms of a sharing of ideas. I'll also mention that John has many loops for commentary and collaboration. So we'd like to make this as active as possible beyond the opportunity that you will have today to participate in a variety of different mindful practices. So with that said, I really like to just focus on what our general outcomes are for this time that we're spending together today. And one of the main ones is really thinking about the research-based benefits of incorporating mindfulness into personal life as well as the early childhood environment. I'll just briefly comment that what drew me towards mindfulness initially was as a practitioner that was professionally very invested in inclusion, and as the parent of a child who often had strategies recommended to support their development. They're often very pricey and not necessarily evidence-based. One of the things that I've always been looking for as a parent and a practitioner is what is the research basis behind what we're doing? And as you'll see throughout this presentation, one of the just amazing things about mindfulness and mindful practices is how strong the evidence base is, and how just, I don't want to say easy, but how a practice with attention and time is something that you can regularly incorporate into your daily routine to great benefits. And so we're going to spend a lot of time really thinking about how to do that and how to strategize, how to make mindful practices a part of your routine, because it is such an incredible evidence-based strategy that has so many benefits for young children and adult development. So we're also, as I mentioned, focusing on mindful strategies supporting adult development as well. So one of the things that we'd like to encourage you all to do, and it is incredibly challenging, is to be fully present. So turn off your cell phones. If you have distractions around you, to whatever extent possible, to minimize those, and just to give yourself the gift of this time and focusing in. And I say that knowing how hard it is, but we're just pausing at the beginning to invite you to try to minimize distractions in your world and your environment. I just want to comment very briefly on what we mean by mindfulness and mindful practices. And when we think about mindfulness, what we're doing is we're noticing what's happening in and around ourselves. And we're doing this without judgment, without criticism, or without reaction. When people are mindful, they're asking themselves, how am I feeling? Do I need to react? As opposed to how am I reacting? Is there any reaction necessary? And how will my choice affect the other people and my environment around me? And so just really being present and taking that time to pause. And again, something we'll revisit throughout the presentation. So I mentioned earlier the incredible evidence base around mindfulness practices and outcomes for young children. And here's just a brief list of just these incredible connections. We have a list of references and current research at the end of the presentation. We can look at support for executive functioning, self-regulation, the idea of empathy and pro-social behavior being specifically supported by engaging in mindful practices, the reduction of stress, that reduction of reactivity, that recognition of a choice before engaging in a reaction. And because stress is reduced, an increase in working memory. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that later too. There's this great model that I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. It was developed by Dan Siegel. Talks about the upstairs and the downstairs brain and how mindfulness can really support that bridge between the two and how important that is. So mindfulness techniques, as I mentioned before, have really been established as a research-based tool that support overall social emotional competence and well-being, and it's certainly linked to cognitive development as well. And those incredible benefits are not limited to young children. When we think about teachers in classrooms, we can see incredible benefits as well. So some of the research areas that have emerged in the past 7 years include reduced stress and burnout. So mindful techniques can act as antidotes to stress within the environment and serve to lower cortisol levels and promote feelings of calm and well-being overall. It can also promote emotional regulation, gives us tools to really help us manage our own emotions effectively, and we can choose how to respond to different challenges that may arise within our environments. It provides the opportunity for increased focus and attention. So it allows us to train those attentional muscles through being more present. Excuse me. And it also serves to increase our self-awareness. So we can really focus more on our own thoughts, our own patterns, how we process the world around us. And that increasing level of self-awareness allows us to be more intentional and reflective in our interactions with the world around us. So at this point, we are going to transition. It may not be the most graceful transition because I'm going to get out of this chair and John's going to get into it. But we're going to now focus on mindful practices for practitioners. And so I'm sure you will enjoy this next part of the presentation. And we're going to transition at this point to John. So thank you.
Just like a ballet. I'm really happy to be here, so thank you all for showing up. And I want to just say a brief word about my own practice and how I got started, but just a brief word. I'll just say that I got started meditating when a friend of mine in college was meditating quite seriously. And I finally picked up a book, and this is, I think you'll get a sense of how long ago this was. How to Meditate was the book. And this was unique at the time. There really wasn't a lot of literature, unlike now, on meditation or mindfulness. And that really piqued my interest. And I started to take one of the only available avenues to learning how to meditate, which was a mail order course. when I lived in Chicago for a few years. I moved on from that to cassette tapes, high technology, and finally began some training with various organizations that started to emerge in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Insight Meditation Society, for one, um, the SRF group, Self Realization Fellowship, Shambhala. Um, I'm losing the acronym here, MBSR, Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, and so on. So I've had a bit of practicing, as they say, and I'm kind of curious in your own practices, what brought you here and what kind of practice you have in your own daily life. And I think and I'm going to be leading you in some practices. So you might think about finding a place that you can get comfortable in. But I first want to say just a bit about why we practice. And I think Jana touched on this a bit, and I have to find where our mouse went to. Um, it's right in front of us, like so much in life. Um, one of the reasons that I think people are drawn to it today is the whole notion of distraction. And there are several studies that have been recently released, and I'm sure you're aware of this. It's not just the screens that we put in front of our faces and in some way in front of our lives, but the anxiety that comes with contemporary living. We live in an age where stress is really prominent, and we hear about young people in particular suffering inordinate amounts of depression and anxiety and so forth. And mindfulness is one way, and we'll hear more about the literature later, to help us navigate the kind of perils of contemporary life, which includes what we're doing right now. I'm sure many of you have had experience with Zoom meetings and the weird kind of environment that we've kind of normalized now. And we've actually dealt with a number of the can you see me jokes before this presentation got started, trying to get the technology up and so forth. But again, this idea of screens and the idea of the anxiety that it produces. And one of the aspects that's been really interesting in recent developments with mindfulness study has been the fMRI. And what you can see on screen here are a bunch of, it's like taking an MRI of the brain. And they do this in real time, having people, for example, meditate or exposing them to photographs of something that would in life generate stress, like a picture, for example, of a tiger, which would generate some stress, I guess, or a spider, and just seeing what areas of the brain would ignite when people apply mindfulness to the situation. And the studies have just exploded. And you can see this is a map of how many articles have appeared in academic journals. So in 1980, around the time I was starting, there were none. There were no academic journals. And by 2022, as you can see, there were 1,400 plus. And so it's really become explosive in terms of an area for research. And you probably noticed in shopping, uh, even the magazines that you can pick up now for about mindfulness. Time magazine will have a special issue devoted to it, and you can pick up apps and so forth. And in a way, I guess you could say it's become a sort of big business. It's certainly become part of contemporary consciousness, but to actually practice is something else again. So these are a couple of books that I think you might find interesting that kind of emerged from these research methods using the fMRI and mindfulness under scientific gazes. But the emotional life of your brain is one. This one's kind of getting a bit creaky. Richard Davidson from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And one of the, to me, most infinitely interesting aspects of this is that this particular book is how important Davidson and others in his wake have discovered emotions are in our life. We like, I think, to think we're rational human beings and we pick our toothpaste because it's the best. But so much of it, it seems, based on the research, is based on our emotions. We like that toothpaste more for whatever reason. Maybe we saw a commercial that appealed to us and so forth. But our emotions really seem to kind of get in the way a lot in our everyday life. Neurodharma, Rick Hansen is somebody who's worked pretty extensively with neuro research, with mindfulness. And so this is a more recent book. You might have come across him in some of your explorations in mindfulness. And I'm just throwing up three quick books here as well. iGen, which deals with an issue that I talked about earlier with how the technology affects consciousness. And so looking at kids, teenagers in particular, and how it affects them. Attention Hijacked, a more recent book, looks at a similar concern issue with contemporary culture. And Saving Time, this one I haven't actually read yet. It's by Jenny Odell. This just came out, and she wrote one of my favorite books from a couple of years ago, which was How to Do Nothing. She's an artist working out of the West Coast, and she tries to turn her life into an art, and to do that in part through mindfulness practices, becoming aware of the environment. And so just three books that you might think of taking a look at, and there's no poverty of them. There's an awful lot, but these maybe are worth your attention. Okay. So, and we're going to talk about the definition of mindfulness. We're going to jump into the practices, but one of the things that all of this research has discovered is just how quickly our our reality is shaped by our brain. And this little diagram here shows the amygdala, which is pretty close to the base brain. So it's going to react pretty quickly to information that you're taking in, sounds and sights and so on. And so if you're walking in your in on a field, and you run across a garden hose, for example, your amygdala is going to kind of like quickly reference any potential threat. And so one of the first things that activates in our mind is this a threat? Is there danger? And it'll pick up the levels of adrenaline we have in our system. It'll pick up the levels of cortisol momentarily. It doesn't last very long, but it lasts long enough so that if it is a snake, you can do something about it, like run or fight or freeze. So, um, so learning to deal with that very real aspect of our kind of biological life, that the first thing that appraises reality is whether or not something is a threat. It kind of suggests that we approach things kind of skeptically or suspiciously. And if anything, today, I think these past several years have really emphasized the differences between groups, and I think to our detriment. Um, but there is, and this is where mindfulness comes in, there is hope. And Paul Ekman came up with this idea based on the neuroscience that there is, in fact, a kind of moment between when the cortisol actually hits our system and we appraise it. And he calls that the moment when, before that occurs, the refractory period, where everything that we take in is going to be, is this a threat? And we can't incorporate information that says elsewise. It's going to be strictly kind of limited to threat or no, threat or no. And so your eyes are open and your heart is beating and so forth. And so at that point, we really don't have much of an opportunity to react. I hope that makes sense. To respond rather to react, which is a distinction I want to kind of tease out a little bit. Um, and possibly, maybe in our own lives, we recognize ourselves here, at least at some point, where our whole being becomes consumed by this kind of passionate and maybe irrational person who cut us off in the drive home from work or whatever it might be. And we let that refractory period kind of take over. We feed it, kind of, right? We start telling stories about the person who cut out in front of us. That person is and so on and so forth. So So with mindfulness then, and with meditation and all these practices, the idea becomes, do you react, which is just going with the cortisol and the adrenaline and the base brain, or do we respond? And the key difference, of course, is that when we respond, we're taking into account more information, particularly relative to who it is we want to be, how it is we want to navigate life. And the likelihood is we don't want to navigate it at least 100% of the time like this, right, where we're constantly boiled over. But I'm sure we recognize people who pretty much do, right? We know people in our lives who are just burning with this on a pretty consistent level. And so the idea of building emotional resilience comes into play with mindfulness. The idea that before you react or before you respond, you've got this space. You have this space that you can decide. And sometimes that space seems not to last very long. But the key is it will recur. And so that's when we can stop ourselves, and instead of reacting, which kind of suggests it's just like a mechanical reaction, right? Amygdala fires, we get cortisol and adrenaline, and so we're gonna do whatever we can, because there's kind of a uh, going to defer to some of the language of my youth, a buzz attached, right, to being angry. There's a kind of a illusionary power that we feel for a second. But the likelihood of doing something that we don't like saying something, or even confronting that person who cut us off, we all know about road rage, right? At least heard about it. And so to instead react. So the distinction becomes what it is we want to do, want to be, and to react accordingly. And so Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, kind of fleshed out the distinction. And he said, between stimulus and response, the reaction, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And that's where our growth and freedom lies, within um, that power to choose. And this is where mindfulness comes in. So I'm going to just skim over this quickly, but this was kind of worked out, pardon me, in academia. Skip Downing, what was he involved with? You remember the name of that group? I'm blocking it. I apologize. But he kind of built this educational system built on the distinction that students have between victim and creator. So victim would be deferring to the base brain, the amygdala response, and creator is when you make from events what you would want them to be and respond rather than react. So trying something new, maybe yelling at that person in front of us who cut us off, isn't really doing much for them or for ourselves, right? Seeking solutions rather than just blaming or complaining. And so again, moving to the idea of a result that is congruent with who it is you want to be. And again, the likelihood is you don't want to be that person forever screaming at the people in front of you who presumably cut you off, right? So this definition then finally of mindfulness is John Kabat-Zinn, who came up with the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which is still flowering. Uh, he started it in a hospital in Boston where people were under severe stress. They were either in significant pain or they were actively or close to actively dying. And so we're talking, the name of his book tells it, full catastrophe living, full catastrophe living. And so people who are under a lot of stress. And he wanted to bring to them, these people, some of what he learned about mindfulness and the idea of still, it's a matter of reaction or response. And so for 8 weeks, he gathered people in this basement room of the Boston hospital and had them working on mindfulness practices. And without exception, after that first 8 weeks, people who were in the program decided that they were, even though they were closer to death, and even if their pain hadn't abated at all, able to deal with it significantly better. And so the definition that John Kabat-Zinn came up with then, I think, is kind of useful. And we'll tease it out a bit when we start practicing in a moment. I want to be conscious of time here. So mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, and we'll talk about that when we actually get into it, on purpose. So paying attention on purpose, right now, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So the present moment is the only time you can be mindful, and then non-judgmentally. So kind of filtering your tendency to reaction in and giving yourself some slack to respond however you do, like noticing whatever you notice without getting down on yourself. Paying attention in a particular way, which means on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So this is actually from a group that was dealing with mindfulness in education out of Amherst College. And they came up with this mindfulness tree. And I don't know what kind of screen you're looking at, but this is all rooted. These are all different mindfulness practices. The base of this tree is, the nurturing soil, and it's communication and connection that we're probably interested in. And this is going to help us to develop these practices. And awareness. So communication, connection with others, and even with ourselves, and awareness. So being mindful. And so the different branches then of this tree, there are some that involve stillness, and this is what we're going to involve ourselves with momentarily, like meditation, being quiet. I've been on retreats, for example, where nobody talked for a week, which is interesting. What crops up, you do plenty of talking, as it turns out. At least I did in my mind, right? But learning not to articulate it vocally, just being quiet, letting yourself listen. So we have stillness practices, quieting the mind. We have generative practices, active reading, for example, loving kindness meditation, for example. And we're going to do just a bit of that today, I hope. Creative, journaling, music and singing. So for those of you who perhaps practice music, the sense of being in the groove, right? How music and singing can kind of lead to this space that's really unusually quiet and active at the same time. So in any rate, there's activists, bearing witness, vigils and marches, relational, deep listening. It's a great practice, deep listening, actually listening to what people are saying to us. Movement, meditation. I'm betting several of you have some practice meditating or doing yoga. And then ritualistic, establishing a personal space or a sacred place or going to a retreat. So these are all different practices that we can become engaged with, and with the idea of becoming more aware, more mindful. And what we quickly notice is how often this happens, that we're present on some way, in some level, but our body is at any rate, but maybe our mind goes off. And so thinking about what we're going to do in 20 minutes, or what's on the grocery list, or what we did in the past that we no longer want to live with, or so what somebody said to us in the line at the grocery store. So, but the idea again of being present, just bringing yourself back. On the far right of this, you can see that these are the transformative aspect of mindfulness is all at the goal of nurturing in us those things that lead to go back to the tree, the sense of communication and connection, which means being generous, nurturing that generous self, acquiring some wisdom about how it is that we act when we act that way. And love as well, developing this sense of self-love, which I know sounds sometimes narcissistic, but isn't necessarily so. Um, so maybe applying at once generosity and love, first to yourself, like the mask in the airplane, right? You have to put the mask on yourself before you can help others. And so beginning with yourself. So finally, I want to try out some practices with you. So if you can find that space that is comfortable. And so I'll just elaborate on that. If you want to lay down, that's perfectly fine. Particularly if you don't have a tendency to fall asleep like I do. So maybe for me, laying down isn't the best. But if you think you can do it without falling asleep, that's fine. The key thing here is to be comfortable. And the four practices we're going to discuss is setting intention. We're going to then actually meditate, so do some simple breath counting exercises, breath awareness exercises. We're going to try the rain meditation, which will lead into a metta or loving kindness meditation. And then quickly, I'll just note the stoplight exam, which is just a quick thing you can do on the sly. So when it comes to intention, and I think I've kind of alluded to this, the idea of asking yourself, what is it that you really want in life? Love, connection, communication, whatever it might be. What is it that you really want in life? Then asking yourself, what are you doing that's moving yourself in that direction? What makes you more likely to develop those things that you want in your life? And then asking yourself, what can I do right now in the present moment, which is the only time we have, sorry, and it's true, that we can make these decisions. What can I do to cultivate that right now? And so mindfulness kind of brings those things up to the fore. And we've all, I think, seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I think that the idea of intention and what it is that we really want to develop kind of develops from that. So once we get beyond the physiological and the safety components of life, moving more and more towards self-actualization, realizing those needs that we have. And I know this sounds really big and grandiose right now. So keeping it at the beginning and keeping it maybe every day simple. Keep it relatively low key. And so one way to begin a day might be, today I'm going to thank somebody who helped us out. So maybe somebody who helped us out in the past, somebody who helped you out during the course of the day, just making it a point to remember to say thank you to that person. But that could be a simple intention that is relatively easy to fulfill. Make it an intention to recognize nature, to feel a sense of gratitude, and maybe expressing that with the thank you as well. Um, Good luck with the one after the next. Not to get angry, and if you do, cut yourself some slack. But the idea of this, when I do get angry, I'm going to be kind to myself and try to let it go. To forgive somebody for some minor transgression, we can go back to the person who cut us off. We can forgive that person without harming anybody or without rewarding that person, right? Um, for cutting us off and see what happens. So, kind of approaching all this with a sense of interest and curiosity, to laugh. One of the best yoga experiences I ever had was in a class with laughing yoga, it was called. And we spent the whole time just laughing. It got very infectious and it was hilarious. Nothing particularly funny was said, but the community of people laughing together was really solid. And when we do laugh, we release, unlike when we have the amygdala response, we mitigate some of the responses of that. And of the cortisol and the adrenaline and so forth, and feel a sense of connection oftentimes. But whatever fits your schema of what it is that you want to be. Um, and we begin to understand that, and this sounds, if you've never meditated before, I mean, maybe even if you have, a little bit strange, that we don't have to believe our thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts are just that, thoughts, and maybe um, don't even come necessarily from us, if that makes sense. We might have heard somebody say something and it somehow resonates with us, but it's our deeds that define us. So we can have the most heinous thought, and the idea of non-action in that case, not acting on it, cutting us ourselves some slack and some loving kindness. Instead of coming down on ourselves, which is more likely to lead into a spiral, right? Um, we don't have to believe our thoughts, and it's our actions that define us. So being kind to ourselves, starting off. Okay. So the idea here, and we're going to begin with some breath counting, if that's okay. So if you can sit in a position that's relatively erect, oftentimes meditation teachers will tell you, your spine has to be straight, but the most important thing right now is that your diaphragm is free, not encumbered, and so you can breathe easily. So sitting in a sense where you're kind of erect, or if you're laying down, you're laying down, and your diaphragm will be free if you're laying down. And if you're comfortable, you can go ahead and close your eyes. And let's begin by taking some deep breaths. And so breathing in, taking a big deep breath in, and then just breathe it out. So if you could perhaps count to 5, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, breathing out, 2, 3, 4, 5, breathing in, 2, at your own pace, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. One more on your own, breathing out. And as you begin to breathe more unconsciously, just becoming aware of where it is you notice your breath most profoundly. So it might be at the base of your nose, the coolness of the air as it comes in. Doesn't really matter. Might be in your chest. Might be in your diaphragm. And setting a small intention here. What is it you would like to do for the next 2 minutes? What kind of mind space would you like to develop for the next 2 minutes? And again, keep it simple, just a sense of calm, peace, whatever it might be. And let that go. And bring your attention to your breath. And so the idea here is to simply be aware of your breath. Sounds simple. When you find that your mind begins to wander, being gentle with yourself and just bring yourself back to your breath. Bring your attention back to your breath, wherever it is you notice it most profoundly. And so we'll just do this for 2 minutes. I'll ring the bell after 2 minutes, just being alone with this sense of you and your breath, for the next 2 minutes. Just allowing your breath to breathe itself. And again, if you find your mind has wandered, just gently bringing it back to your breath. For 20 seconds. I'm curious what happened. Any responses? Anything surprising, interesting?
I think that it actually takes practice to make it happen because my mind wanders to what should I have for dinner? Will my boys be quiet so I can listen?
Right.
What do I still need to get done for work tonight? Yeah, not easy.
How was it to bring yourself back then?
Um, Still need practice.
Thank you. Anybody else?
There are a few comments in the chat.
Oh,
Feel very relaxed, felt so calm, peace, refreshing.
those are all good
Sure, it
things.
takes practice to calm the mind, calm feeling. It's amazing to feel completely relaxed, even if it's just for a moment. It's also helpful to not be critical when the mind wanders. Relaxed and calm, very peaceful. I saw waves on a shore, then came back.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's interesting. So it's only, we spent 2 minutes doing that. And I guess maybe understanding how simple it is in a way to set aside 2 minutes. I know it's very difficult in reality. Oftentimes we just get caught up in our stuff, but if we can get a piece of that calm, right? Or just to get hooked, connected to ourselves for a couple of minutes a day. In having taught this and been in classes where I've watched my own mind, this image strikes me as being closely analogous to what a lot of people will feel. And so the idea of monkey mind, either a monkey that's chattering away at us or just falling asleep, which will happen almost inevitably in big groups of people meditating together. But the surprise oftentimes, especially when we stretch out the practice, to watch our mind can be pretty amazing how active it can be when we're trying to calm it down, or actually not even trying to calm it down. I misspoke. It's more just watching what happens to our minds when we try to pay attention. So I think I used to teach public speaking, and I would teach mindfulness practices as a way to calm people down, to help calm them down. And one of my students said at one point that it was like watching a flume ride at an amusement park in terms of thoughts. Like, here comes a thought, there it goes. Here comes another thought, there it goes. And I thought that was a really kind of nice analogy to the experience of mindfulness. The non-judgmental part can be difficult. And so again, a lot of people find this part hard, just being easy on ourselves, taking a forgiving attitude to what's happening in our minds. And it's not that meditation brings this on, it's that we become aware of what's going on a good part of the day, right? So if it's okay, I would like to get into a longer meditation. And this one's popularized by Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H. She has a online class where she meets every week and does various meditations. Just can log in and Tara Brach, T-A-R-A Brach. I'll write it down later.com. But she has a whole library of stuff. But she popularized this notion of the rain meditation, which isn't all that difficult from what we were doing or different from what we've been doing. But it's maybe making some things more distinct, clearer. And so we're going to be pretty much doing what we did a moment ago. And the RAIN acronym is simply that we recognize what's going on. That's the first step in the RAIN process. This, okay, thinking. So it might even take a bit of labeling, thinking, planning, whatever it might be. So just recognize stiff, anything that goes on in the brain, the mind, just recognize, accept, or acknowledge. Thinking, okay. And then, and this one might seem strange, but letting it be, not trying to push it away, and possibly even thinking to investigate. And by investigate here, it's not quite like a detective, but rather like just seeing what unfolds. Here's this weird thought. Let's just let it be and kind of lean into it a little bit, if that makes sense. So, where am I feeling this? Just without getting caught up in that. So it's kind of a fine line, but just seeing if you can work with that and then non-attaching. In Tara Brach's N, there are two different N's. Nourish would be something else that you can attempt if you'd rather. In other words, kind of like whatever it is you need at that moment, just provide it in your mind, in your heart. And so we'll try this for a while if that's okay. And I'm gonna move from this into a loving kindness meditation. And so if we can get in a position once again that perhaps you just were in when you were meditating the first time, or maybe making some small adjustments, that's fine. Just whenever you feel comfortable, just close your eyes if that feels comfortable. If you'd rather not, if you'd rather keep your eyes open, just keep your eyes unfocused. See if you can just kind of let your gaze broaden and let your gaze be unfocused. To begin this time as well, I'm going to move us through some relaxation exercises. So just notice your forehead And any tightness that you find in your forehead, just release. Let it go. Kindly, gently. Moving down to your eyes. Notice any tension that you might be carrying in your eyes and just let that go. Soften your eyes. Soften your cheeks. Noticing your mouth. First your lips, then the inside of your mouth. Maybe putting a gap between your teeth and relaxing any tension that you find in your mouth. Just letting it breathe out as you move down to your jaw, which is a space we tend to carry a lot of tension. Possibly wiggling your jaw left to right softly and allowing any tension that you have there to move into the air. Moving down to our neck, the back of your neck, the sides of your neck, the front of your neck, your throat. And again, with your out breath, just letting any tension vanish into the air. As you move down to your shoulders, prime spot for tightening up. And allowing any tension you feel there to just breathe out. As you move down to your upper arms, your elbows, your lower arms, your wrists, your thumbs, your index fingers. And just moving down to your small finger, the palms of your hands, the backs of your hands, everything from your shoulders through your fingertips, just allowing with your next out breath any tension you feel in your arms and hands to breathe out. And moving to our chest and the backs of our chests. Any tension that we feel there, allow it to dissipate. Down our back, to our lower back, your abdomen, and any tension that you feel there, allowing it just to dissipate, breathing it out. To your hips, to your thighs, noticing any sensations, any tightness you feel in your knees. In your calves, in your ankles, the soles of your feet, tops of your feet, your toes one by one, beginning with your big toes, moving down to your small toe, each in turn, and allowing any tension to just be breathed out. And just for a moment, imagine as if you can breathe from the top of your head in, and with your next out breath, just sending any tension out through the top of your head, down out your mouth, down your shoulders, out your fingertips, down your back, down your legs, out your toes, as though your whole body is breathing any tension that you have out. Begin to move your attention to your breath. just aware of your breath. No place to go, nothing to do, just being aware of your breath, watching as it breathes itself. And if you find that your mind has wandered from your breath, acknowledging that, letting it go, bringing yourself gently back to your breath. And if you discover that you find a particular thought or idea recurs, maybe investigating, just leaning into that a bit. How does that impact your body? How does that thought impact your mind? Do you tighten anywhere? And maybe just a quick revisiting of your physical self. Any tightness creep back? If so, that's fine, just letting it go. And by letting it go, not attaching, non-attaching, just letting it be. Thoughts go on their own. And so for the next 3 minutes, I'll ring the bell periodically, which is just a reminder to notice where you are. And if you feel like investigating, just leaning into that thought or emotion a little bit and not attaching, just letting it go. Just breathing. And in non-attaching and in acknowledging without judgment, just letting whatever comes up come up, like your breath, allowing it to just come and go. And at this point, I'd like to introduce the idea of meta mindfulness. And so just continue as you are. If you need to move around a little bit to get comfortable, that's fine too. But just call to mind somebody, maybe it's something, some animal, for which you can feel a sense of easy love. It's easy to love this person. It's easy to love this cat or whatever, whoever it might be. And just wishing that person well, or cat or dog. May this person be safe. May this being be safe. May this being be happy. May this being live with ease. May this being live in peace. Or if those don't strike you as genuine, just any positive phrases: healthy, happy, peaceful, at rest, come to mind. And then bringing yourself into your awareness and wishing the same thoughts to yourself. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I live in peace, or words to that effect. Just trying it out. And then bringing to mind somebody who perhaps is a minor annoyance in your life, just a minor annoyance. And then seeing what happens when you wish that person well. May this person too be healthy. May this person too be happy. May this person too be at peace. Imagining the three of you together and imagining the sphere of awareness broadening to include people in your area, people on your block, people in your apartment complex, people at work. And wishing for people you don't even know, may we all be healthy. May we all be happy. May we all live with peace. May we be free from suffering. And broadening the sphere of awareness even more to include everybody in our state, everybody in the country, everybody on earth, all living creatures. Just working with a general sense of loving kindness. May we all be happy. May we all be healthy. May we all be free from suffering. May we all live in peace, or words to that effect. Just letting it resonate in your heart and in your mind. That was a long sitting. How did you do? Comments, questions? I'm sorry I can't see the text, the chat, but any questions, comments, reactions? How's it going?
In the chat, there's it was calming.
I see that. Yes, I was able to pull it up. Thank
you're
you. I got it. It will be interesting to hear what your students say. Not unrelated, Jamie, right? Yoga, meditation. Well, I'll just then move on to the last part of, I love it. The last part of my presentation anyway, and that is the stoplight exam. And this really is quite simple. And the idea is that it's not necessarily that you have to find a spotlight, but next time you get stuck, might be in a line at a supermarket, or it might be at a stoplight, or it might be just waiting for somebody to get through the checkout counter, whatever it might be. But just taking a moment to check in, see how you're doing, remember your intention. Are you doing something that would help you to work toward your goals with your intentions, and not being hard on yourself, just noticing, becoming aware of it, that human capacity not to, and then simply take a breath, smile. One of my teachers called that mouth yoga, smiling. It does have a kind of interesting neurological effect. And go on. And then for extra credit, you might throw out positive thoughts if you feel up to it to somebody who is giving you some grief at that particular moment. It's kind of like, okay, may you be healthy and happy, or whatever it is that happens to go along with your personality. So with this, I know we actually meditated for quite a bit of time that last section, but you don't need that much time starting off. And a couple minutes is not a bad place to begin. There's actually a book called The 2-Minute Meditator. So if you can set aside a couple of minutes a day, and of course that takes work, right? You have to actually plan for it and set that time aside. But all you really need is a timer and your intentions. And if, as much as possible, you can think of a way to make it something you're looking forward to, as opposed to, I have to meditate again. So picking a day that works, or time of day that works for you. I'm not a morning person, so I tend to do my meditations late morning or early afternoon. And maybe even seek support with a online meditation group. There are probably meditation groups close by. There are certainly meditation apps that give you a sense of virtual connection, which is actually where I'm doing most of my together time with other meditators. It's online, so people will actually meditate together online. Seems kind of strange, but we just did it. So and most importantly, simply remember to breathe. Of course, you won't forget, but breathe, notice, let it go, reset, breathe, notice, etc. So thank you all. I know Jana has some words that she wants to give you about using this in the classroom. So see you later. We were changing again.
Hello, everyone. I hope you feel as relaxed as I do after that. I wanted to share just some ideas of different practices that you can incorporate with young children. And one of the things that I really wanted to stress as we think about this are the various developmental levels of children and what that means for the practices that we can effectively incorporate into the classroom environment. So skip ahead from there. So really we need to think about the age and stage of the children we're working with and really thinking about how to tailor activities to where children are at developmentally. One of the things that I think is really important, and when we talk about upstairs and downstairs brain, one of the things that I think is really important to do is to make connections to mindfulness explicit, to talk about what you're doing. You know, for many of us, I didn't start any kind of mindful practices till I was an adult. And, you know, a good part of my initial practice was sleeping. And so the idea that for young children to give them these practices and to incorporate these practices at a young age can really be a gift that they can practice throughout their lives. So again, that making explicit, this is why we're doing this, this is what it supports, becomes very important. And so practices should reflect what you know about each individual child. And again, that's very much developmentally appropriate practice, including their unique development and their overall cultural context. So we really want to individualize the strategies that we put in place, not only think about them from developmental context. So one of the things that, and this is just a great image, one of many that have come out of the work of Daniel Siegel that I just wanted to briefly talk about. And I think that this is so powerful in terms of explaining the upstairs and the downstairs brain. And as you all know, I think you would agree with this statement, probably in the past 5 or 7 years, we've gotten so much more proficient about talking about our emotions and the idea of emotional regulation. And I think one of the great benefits of this upstairs downstairs brain analogy is that it can give young children, again adapted by where they are developmentally, a way to understand that concept of emotional regulation. Because when we're talking about emotional regulation, we're talking about something that's very abstract, but talking about the brain in this way at a very young age can kind of forge that connection, and it can help understand what's automatic and what children might not necessarily or might be developing control over, and the strategies around that. So again, that making things explicit. So when we're talking about that upstairs brain, we're very much talking about the prefrontal cortex. So we're thinking about thinking and planning. And we can think about that upstairs brain as a really well-lit control center. So it's responsible for our logical thinking, our planning, problem solving, and our capacity to focus attention. So it really helps us make deliberate choices. It helps us consider consequences, and it helps us serve to understand varying perspectives overall. That downstairs brain is the limbic system, and it's a feeler and a reactor. And so we can think of the downstairs brain as a fire alarm system. And a lot of these concepts John talked about in different ways. It's responsible for our basic emotions and survival instincts. So it really reacts quickly to threats, and it can trigger our fight or fight response, like fear, anger, or excitement. So when we make this connection between the upstairs and downstairs brain, one of the things that we're really helping or can help children understand is that the downstairs brain is under development and their upstairs brain is maturing gradually. So the downstairs brain can flood, strong emotions can really kind of serve to overwhelm those thinking abilities of our upstairs brain. And the idea of understanding that everyone has two brains can help children understand their own emotions and why they act the way they do sometimes. And this can learn to differentiate between feeling angry and expressing anger in a healthy way, for example, can also help develop coping mechanisms. So the idea that if you understand that downstairs brain can kind of hijack your thinking. It can really help you learn calming techniques and when to effectively employ them. And I think that with that understanding comes self-compassion. When we understand that our strong emotions are natural, it can foster self-compassion and reduce what may in some cases be shame, and that everyone experiences big feelings. You can work on calming down as opposed to judgment. And I think that that two brain analogy, again, can be a really effective way to support understanding what can happen with our emotions and our thoughts overall. Oops, excuse me for a second. So when we think about guidelines for incorporating a variety of different strategies, I'm going to talk about kind of a buffet of a variety of strategies for you to pick and choose from. And again, I mentioned before that we'd love to hear about strategies that you have all incorporated on a regular basis. There are a variety of different reasons why some might resonate for some of us and not for others. And I think that and unique classes might find some that resonate for them versus others as well. One of the things we always want to do is to start simple. As you know, the whole format of this presentation is stressing. It's incredibly important to practice what you preach and to establish routines around what you're doing within the classroom and even the home environment. I'll just mention when our children were younger, up through high school, one of the routines we had in place was sharing gratitude at dinner. And so that just became a daily routine. And that was a mindful practice. That was something we incorporated on a regular basis. So within the classroom, I just wanted to start with a very simple area, the idea of starting with mindfulness of the environment. We can think of mindfulness of the environment as awareness of an object where we're taking note of the world around us, awareness of ourselves within the environment, or taking note of ourselves within the world around us. And the self in this particular context refers to children specifically. And so the idea that there needs to be coaching and there needs to be activities that kind of hone in those senses and really support children in understanding that mindfulness of the environment overall. So one of the things around awareness of objects in the environment, taking advantage of daily opportunities, which there are so many fantastic and wonderful opportunities that present themselves on a regular basis. So the idea of just taking clovers that have fallen and really taking the time to look at them and notice the different colors and notice the different textures, or the child on the right is eating a raisin, which is a fantastic idea or activity in terms of put the raisin in your mouth, feel it on your tongue, feel it plump as your saliva interacts with the raisins, slowly chew the raisin, just taking the time to really interact in that meaningful way with those objects. We can think of, and I'll invite you again to chat and share your own ideas. Some other ideas: being a nature detective, exploring the outdoor environment and choosing things like a rock, a leaf, or a flower, and really encouraging children to use all their senses to observe the details. I'll just mention briefly, this is an activity I do regularly with my college students, and they're amazed. You know, we're all in the environment, outside in environments often, but to really pause and take note of the environment and colors and textures and smells is a wonderful opportunity, and you get so much out of it. So sensory bingo, a bingo board with squares containing different textures, sounds, smells, and sights that can be found within the environment, and having children explore and mark off those bingo cards as they find the different sounds. Mindful drawings, choosing an object or scenes outdoors and then drawing what they see, focusing on details and textures and colors to capture the experience overall. And I'm going a bit quick. I'm mindful of the time. And so please, again, I invite you to share your ideas and activities as well. The idea of ourselves within the environment. I think one of the things that's so incredibly interesting, we are bombarded, our bodies are constantly bombarded with data. Um, the temperature of the room, sounds in the background, how our clothes are feeling on our bodies, how our hair is feeling on our heads. And we tune all of that out. We tend to just tune those things out so we can focus on what we're focusing on. But the idea of really helping focus on our body within the environment. So body sensations, what does the warm sun on skin feel like? Having a scavenger hunt around that, the wind in hair, grass tickling feet, having children seek those feelings out, particular sensations within the environment, and discuss how their bodies interact and connect with nature in those ways. Having a nature mirror where children can find a quiet spot outdoors and imagine their bodies as part of the landscape. Trees reaching down, birds soaring in the sky, and then move in that particular way. Engaging in a sound walk where they focus only on the sounds outside. One of the things that we do in our child development lab that I'll just mention briefly is a tiger walk where they're transitioning from one environment to the other. And we ask them to walk like a tiger on 2 feet, which automatically means they're not exactly walking like a tiger, but to move their heads as if they're taking note of everything that they see and hear in the environment, and to move slowly as a tiger would so that they could take and make sense of the environment overall. Mindfulness of the body, really working with children to pay attention with their senses, or have awareness of movement, to engage in meditation on the breath, and to attend to the thinking process. And attending to the thinking process is very much something that you would do with older preschool, early elementary age children. And some of the activities here are having a color scavenger hunt connected to sight, hearing, musical chairs with nature sounds as opposed to music, sounds of waves, sounds of raindrops, and having children move around the room and stop when the sound stops. Touch, blindfold, texture guessing, for example, or going on a nature smelling walk where you're encouraging children to identify different scents that they interact with in the environment. And there's a whole list of possible scents that children can identify within the environment overall. And again, awareness of movement. Somebody mentioned yoga earlier, and again, what a great way to connect mind and body awareness. And there's so many fantastic activities for yoga that are available online and via video. So really practicing poses slowly and mindfully, incorporating them into routines. Again, they can be fantastic for transitions, or doing mirror mimicry. Children can pair up and do that kind of mimicry, or mimic your movements exactly. And I see that some people have posted some ideas in chat, but if you have others, oh, thank you so much. If you have others that you'd like to share, please do so. One of the really easy things to incorporate, and I have 2 pictures here because I wanted to really emphasize that idea of differentiation by age. Here we have 2 in the left-hand side. We have 2 children who are older, preschool and early school age. And the idea that we can teach them to become mindful of their breath. And in that case, they can put their hands on their diaphragm, breathe deeply in and out, and really kind of feel that and reinforce that through their feelings. Whereas adults, we don't necessarily need to do that. But here in the picture on the right, you see the young child, the preschool toddler age child, where filling up your diaphragm with breath, having that really concrete visual of a stuffed animal on top that will move when you fill your breath is really showing the importance. And if you fill your breath too fast, the animal's going to fall off. So a really concrete way to stress that strategy in a way that's also meaningful. Thinking about thinking, the higher level concept, but a thought called cloud drawing clouds and asking them to put in emotions associated with varied thoughts. Engaging in mindful listening, which John mentioned earlier, the idea of focused and attentive listening while someone's telling a story, and a nature gratitude walk, walking outside and encouraging children to notice things that they're grateful for in nature. And there are just a variety of examples there. So I know that we are running short on time. I want to emphasize again the incredible importance of finding strategies that are effective for you, for the group of children that you work with, and embedding them into routines. Thinking about what kind of strategies complement developmental goals, what routines are best to include in the strategies, and how can those particular strategies be incorporated on a regular basis. So thank you so much, Karen. I know that I need to turn things back over to you. Please, if you have other ideas and want to pop them in chat, please do. And thank you so much for sharing this space with us today.